So, hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I placed in chat um, a link to the Google Doc that has the information. It should have come in an email to you as well. So, I will be talking from this PowerPoint, which you have a copy of the slides. You also have some handouts that would be helpful for you to look at. You might want to download some. So just something, to encourage you to do and we have that. Today's session, our outcomes are, I really want to help you understand how the tiered approach of the teaching pyramid, which many of you are familiar with, can promote healthy social emotional development and prevent behavior that adults find challenging. We're going to talk about a couple of key strategies that are used in the teaching pyramid that can be used by people even who are not using the teaching pyramid at this time. And we're going to give you some resources that you can use right away. So the one announcement I want to make is, and some of you may have seen the Child Care Development Division of the California Department of Social Services has been hosting a series of webinars around the exclusion. Sorry, I'm looking at exclusion here. That's not gonna expulsion and suspension legislation. And so they did one yesterday that was primarily focused on the law itself. And then they're going to be talking about strategies and nurturing behavior through support on November 3rd. So I just want to make sure that you all are aware of those. This link will take you to sign up for the CCDD listserv. And so that's what I just want to make sure that you are aware of those. So Beginning Together, who I'm representing today, was established in 1999, and our purpose was to really help take all the um, information and research that was being done on disabilities and inclusion and help translate that from theory to practice. So we are administered by the California Department of Social Services in collaboration with WestEd, and we do have training, technical assistance, and support across the state of California. We have a vision for the state, which is that all children in California, including children with disabilities, health conditions, or delays, have access to quality childcare with active participation and appropriate support. So that's really our hope. That's what we're really aiming to do with our work. And I love this photo. This is one of my favorite photos. This was in a lab school, and this child is probably in his teenage years now. But at the time, he happened to have Down syndrome. But here you can see that he's showing the book to his caregiver and peers, and they are all riveted on him. And it's just such an opportunity to see. And he was in that setting for all of his preschool years and was very integrated and included in that experience. So the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the tiered approach from the teaching pyramid. We're going to explore some ways to understand behavior, and I'm going to share some things that were very helpful to me as a parent and as a teacher that came out of Positive Discipline from Jane Nelson. And then we're going to look at a couple of the tools of the teaching pyramid and how you can use that and share that with people. So one thing that I do try to do is I have a Bright Ideas page just so you can take notes on the things as we go through them. And I'm just going to show you this is what it looks like if you download it from the Google chat. If you do not download it or do not have time, just get a piece of paper out because you can also think about those questions. And it's really to encourage you to take notes along the way so that you don't wait to the end and say, oh, wait, what was it that we talked about in the beginning? So I want to encourage you to visit our website. I'm just going to double check my handout to make sure that I have that website on the last slide. So this is the website, cainclusion.org. That's where you get to this page and you can get information on the teaching pyramid and on um, Beginning Together, and Map to Inclusion and Belonging has a lot of great resources as well. So, oh, here's where the website is. See, I knew I had it somewhere. Um, so at this point, I just want you to know that you can get information about the teaching pyramid from WestEd, cainclusion.org. It did start from a national perspective, and some of you may be familiar with the old CEFL, which is what it was originally called, and now it's the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. And they have a lot of resources. A lot of their resources we've adapted for California and they're on our website, but they're always coming up with new resources. And so we encourage you, if you want, to check out their website as well. Um, so that this is what the pyramid looks like. It's a tiered framework, and there's things that we do for all children, and that's the widest part of the base, and it's the promotion tier. And basically, it's all the things you all know from high quality education, developmentally appropriate practice. So the two areas that we focus on when you do a teaching pyramid training with us is nurturing and responsive relationships and high quality supportive environments. And those two elements really work together to provide the universal strategies. So one of the things that I'm sharing with you today are some things that are universal strategies and that can be applied to all children. But what people sometimes say is, oh, but this child is having difficulty. I want to focus on the top strategies. The children who are struggling, especially with challenging behavior, need the bottom strategies more than anyone, because typically they're the ones that don't have a relationship with each other, with the other children, with the adults. They're really struggling with the relationships, and the environment may not be supporting some of their behavior and learning. So really focusing on those two elements for all children is going to help everyone to have fewer children that rise to the top. The next tier 2, is where you really get into the targeted social emotional supports and looking at what are those things that children who continue to struggle may need teaching in. Basically, we know that when a child doesn't know how to behave, we teach. So this tells you what to teach and how to teach it and when to teach it. And so this is considered the prevention tier. It's preventing significant serious behaviors. And then the top tier is the smallest because that should be the fewest children. It's also the tallest because it's the most intense, and it is intensive individualized intervention. And what we like to remind people of is the intensity is not for the child. Children whose behavior is challenging already live intense lives. Everybody's always yelling at them. They're in trouble all the time. So they have intense lives. This tier asks the intensity to be shifted to us, the adults, so that we really have an opportunity to observe, to study, to try to be detectives and figure out what's going on with the children. And from there, we can do some individualization of some of the interventions that we may have been trying with the whole group and need to be modified for the child. So that's the tiered intervention, and that approach of starting with those bottom tiers is one thing I really want to emphasize, because that's the easiest part to skip when you're frustrated or challenged by a behavior. I will say the most important element of the teaching pyramid is this real foundation, which is the workforce. So it's all of the family childcare providers, teachers, directors, assistants, behavior specialists, everybody who's on there giving this treatment to the children. So one of the things that I love is learning from other people. And Maria Polson is a person who um, has been a long-term mentor of mine and has worked as in charge of the Keck School of Medicine, clinical pediatrics, psychology, and psychiatry units. And basically, she kind of detailed these are some things when we're looking at the effective workforce. These are skills that we want to have in that workforce. So think about, you want somebody who's consistent, nurturing, and emotionally responsive. So this is sometimes difficult. People are having their own struggles, issues, things can be happening with the family. For the teachers, But when they come to work, what we want is for them to really strive for consistency, to be very nurturing, and to be emotionally responsive. It's also important that people understand child development and how children learn. One of the things I keep hearing is that, we're getting younger children because of the shift of some of the 4-year-olds into TK. That means that some of the traditional preschool groups are serving younger and younger children. So really understanding development and what's so different about older 2-year-olds and young 3-year-olds than the 4-year-olds you might have been used to working with. And how do children learn, and understanding brain-based learning is important. The other thing is we believe that behavior is communication, and that the child's behavior is an expression of how they're coping with the world. So if we understand the behavior is not intended to bug us or make us mad, it's intended to tell us how they're coping or not coping with what's going on. I love this next one. Accept the urgency of a young child's needs. I think it's important to remember that young children live in the now. They're right in the present moment. They don't have good understanding of past and future. They're starting to, but when something happens, it's urgent to them. Everything is right away, right now. Look at me here, come here, come here. And understanding that, you can accept it. You don't have to always jump to it. You can say, I hear you. I know you want me to come over there. I'm changing somebody's diaper right now. I'll be there in just a minute. But knowing that that urgency comes from their state of living in the now. And then finally, even if we are having a bad day at home or something's happening, we need to be very emotionally balanced so that the children can predict our behavior. One of the things that I think creates a emotionally safe environment is when children have a sense of predictability, both in what's happening and what's the reactions of the adults around them going to be. So the teaching pyramid is based on evidence-based practices. There's research showing that each of those strategies is reliably producing its effect. It's also this tiered intervention. And one of the things that we found is it helps adults really understand where to put their energy and their effort so that you can reliably increase the social emotional skills and cement the relationships while decreasing the behaviors that we find challenging. And finally, the response to intervention, or the multi-tiered system of supports, which some of you may be familiar with. This is another great thing about the tiered intervention. You can always go back. Have I done those other strategies at these lower tiers? If not, how do I add to them? How do I go to the next higher tier? So here comes a few elements of understanding behavior. So as I said before, behavior is communication. Behavior has meaning. So babies do not have to raise their hand if they're hungry. They don't say, "Excuse me, I think I need a bottle right now." That in fact, babies communicate through their behavior, through their squirming and cries and those kinds of things. And as children get older, they continue to use behavior instead of language because language is still new to them. So they're still going to use behavior more than they do language. And even when a child has language, the behavior is still important to look at. And I say this as a person who loves texting with my children, my adult children. But the emoji becomes an important element of texting because they can't see or hear my tone. They can't read my behavior. So if I say, I'm sure you are doing everything so beautifully, then and I give a heart after that or a thumbs up, then they know, oh, that's a really heartfelt sentiment. If I say, I know you're doing things so beautifully, and I do a rolling eyes emoji, then they're going to be like, oh, wait, what's happening? So behavior is part of how we all, as human beings, communicate our message in addition to language. So we just need to be very aware of that. So here's my mentor, Marie Polson, again. It's important that caregivers, so this would be parents as well as educators, interpret behaviors that are challenging as signs of stress and an inability to cope rather than indications of willfulness or defiance. Children would prefer to deal with their world in effective ways, but children who are living with extreme stress may not have learned easily from prior experiences. They may need to be taught and retaught simple social expectations other children learn naturally. So I love this because, again, when you're on the receiving end of this challenging behavior, it can feel like willfulness and defiance, especially to parents. But if we recognize that this is, some children's brains are experiencing stress in ways that we don't understand, children who have been exposed to traumatic events, children who have underlying conditions like an anxiety disorder or something, they're going to overinterpret things in the environment that we don't recognize. So if we understand that's where the behavior is coming from, and I know lots of us, especially working with younger children, are pretty good at saying, oh, he's just overwhelmed right now. There's too much happening. There's too much noise. And he's just falling apart. That's a really good reminder that we can think about this from the perspective of how can we help this child to deal with the world in an effective way. So why is it that we find behavior challenging? So we know we have to focus on the behavior, but if we can take out our reactions and not go to that, oh, he's just so willful, or oh, he's being defiant, or he's just trying to get me mad, and say, what's he trying to communicate? What would that bubble, if he was a cartoon, say above his head? And this is where, if you are familiar with Jane Nelson and her work in positive discipline, she was grew out of the Adlerian psychological method. So the Adlerian understanding of humans is that the primary need of all human beings is to belong, so to fit into the whole, and to feel significant, to be unique. So that sounds a little bit contradictory, of belonging and uniqueness, but basically we want to belong by being valued for who we are uniquely. So it's really that understanding that no matter what you bring to this group that you're in, we really want to get to know you and value you and promote your connection and belonging with one another. So as I said, this is based on the work of Jane Nelson, and it's Nelson with an E, if you haven't read her materials, but there's a lot of really good information. And we're going to talk about mistaken goals, which is a big part of a lot of her work. And I think the mistaken goals for me, as I said, as a parent and also as a teacher, it's super helpful for me to understand and think about what am I feeling, what am I interpreting, and what might be going on. So let me just tell you how this works. If you believe that all human beings want to find belonging and significance, so if that, which I do, so I have to admit that is, I do resonate with that philosophy, then the mistaken goals are things that children use to try to find belonging and significance. And these things are like undue attention, misguided power, revenge, assumed inadequacy. So they have put together a mistaken goals chart. So again, this is the thing that is really going to be easier if you download it because it's tiny print. But you can see that it's divided into these 4 categories: attention, power, revenge, and assumed inadequacy. And then it has several conditions that help you understand what might be going on. And I'm going to break it apart and take you through those. I also want to say that if you click on this link, it is takes you to an article by Jane Nelson about mistaken goals. And also, I think it has the chart again. So, oh, it's going to show you that again. So here's how to recognize some mistaken goals. In the first column, like I said, I showed you those are the 4 goals. Then in the second column, when you look in the second column, it's names a feeling that you as the adult might be experiencing. So this is why it's really helpful for you to kind of understand this child's not doing this to make me angry, but I'm sure angry. Or this child isn't doing this to make me give up or feel hopeless, but that's how I'm feeling. So really thinking about what is this behavior bringing up in you as the adult. Then the third column describes if that's the feeling that you get, typically these are the ways that you respond as an adult. And don't worry, I'm going to show you this. I'm breaking it down. The fourth column describes how the child responds typically to those typical adult reactions. And it will sound very familiar to you when you look at them. And then columns 5 and 7 list some of the underlying beliefs that the child might be not consciously, but where this is coming from, what's driving this behavior, and some coded messages that might help us think differently about our approach. The final column has some proactive and empowering responses that we can try. And again, this is a strategy that it's kind of like you have to reflect on it, take some time. Sometimes it's helpful with a colleague. So let me just show you one row. I'm just going to take one row and it's of misguided power. So I'm taking it's the let me see which column it's in. I think misguided power is the second row. So the child's goal is to be the boss. The adult will often, when a child is using this behavior that is because they want to be the boss, that adult will feel challenged or angry or threatened or sometimes defeated. And so as adults, we fight back. We dig in our heels, they dig in their heels, or we give in. We just are like, fine, whatever. Or we just get super like, I'm gonna make you that challenging. So we're gonna really do this. And the way the child reacts to that is that intensifies their behavior. They don't know they can lose a fight. I love learning that. When they're in a power struggle, they don't know they can lose. They live in the now. They will dig in for a long time. That defiant compliance when they, you know, stomp off and then they hit their other classmate because they look like they were paying attention to, but they're really upset. Or if you become upset, that's for them, that feels like they've won. And for some children, it's like, okay, now I can be upset too. And it's kind of this passive power. So this is sort of what's happening again unconsciously for most of us, for most of the child and the adult. So here's the possible relooking at it. If you think about the child's belief behind this behavior, they may be thinking when they're saying no and digging in their heels, I belong only when I'm the boss, in control, or proving no one else can boss me. So that's when they're really trying to find that control and power. Or you can't make me. That's their belief. I'm the one in charge of myself. The adult says, I'm in control and you must do as I say. Or I know that if I lecture you or punish you, it's the best way to motivate you to do your better behavior. So that's and all these things are again unconscious and not necessarily helpful to the changing that behavior. But if you understand that coded message, what the child is saying when I belong only when I'm the boss, they're saying, let me help, give me choices, give me some power. So if you can, instead of bumping up against them with your power, if you can acknowledge, okay, I can't switch a brain, I can't turn them on or off. I can try to move to a side by side instead of across the table. So instead of fighting with them, you can say, okay, let's see, how can we make this happen? Um, Withdraw from the conflict. Don't get caught up in the power struggle. That's where you can sometimes say, I understand you want to do this, but first we have to put on our shoes, then we can go outside. That's just the routine. It's not about me, it's the routine. So anyway, these are just again some things that come from more from her books and from her guidance. Um, so this is an opportunity right now for you to just think about what's your reaction to the idea of mistaken goals and how do you think you might use this chart to understand behavior you find challenging. And I'm not saying this is an easy, like, oh, I just gave you a 5-minute overview, but I think it can be a very empowering tool for adults to use. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute. As I said, if you didn't print out your bright ideas, you can just take a piece of paper and I'm going to give you, a minute and a half to make some notes. So what we want to think about now is when people are struggling with behavior, what they really want when they come to a workshop or when they come to you as a director is they want you to just give them the magic tool, the workshop, the technique, the strategy. So all the challenging behaviors will disappear. I will tell you, I've been waiting for that my whole life, and do not have it. So one of the things we want to realize is we don't have the magic wand, but we do have some tools that are close to magic, and that's what I'm going to share with you right now. So there's two tools that we talk about in the teaching pyramid that are close to magic. And as I said, these start with the universal strategies. They actually start with the effective workforce. This one does. And it's something that you can certainly use, at all times to think this through as you're working with children whose behavior may be challenging to you. So these are the two tools, and we're going to talk about them for the rest of this training session. So the first one is reflection, and the second one is positive descriptive acknowledgement. And I will say these are not, many of you are familiar with these, so we're going to talk a little bit about how do you share this with, especially I know many of you are in a director position. How do you think about this with staff? How do you build this in? So the first close to magic tool is reflection, and reflection is such an important skill for those of us who work with children and families. We are very busy when we're working with children. We are chasing children for a living, I always say, and keeping your eye on a lot of things and processing and planning and reflecting in the moment, like how did that work? What do I do differently? But you also need to stand back and really consider what's happening. And that's that reflection. Laura Fish, who some of you may have heard trained before, used to say, you can't see the movie when you're in the movie, that you really need to stop and think and then act. And that way, if you're familiar with Dan Siegel's model of the hand model of the brain, and we talk about flipping our lid, when you are very upset with something, you're in the emotional center of your brain, and all of your good ideas and experience and everything else are up here in your thinking brain, and you don't have access to them when you're upset. So we always know that reflection reconnects us to our thinking brain. And you can think about, what is it I learned in that workshop? Or, gosh, I'm feeling really angry. Didn't that say that might be about power? Or I'm feeling so defeated. Maybe that's something to do with inadequacy. You can also reflect on the child's experience and perspective. Again, we forget sometimes that kids have only been on this planet for, 30 months, and what they're experiencing. This is all new for them. They don't understand. They don't know that there's things to do when there's a group of children together. They haven't had that experience before, perhaps. So we can sometimes stop and think, what does this feel like to this child who's never had any structure? Everything has always been do whatever you want, whenever you want, wake up when you want, go to sleep when you want. And suddenly you've got this schedule and a routine. That's going to feel very different. So it's reflecting on those elements can be very, very helpful. And reflection is one of those things you can take tools such as the mistaken goals chart. That's a thing you can do for more deep reflection, not in the moment necessarily, but coming to it afterwards. So what is reflection? I love to say it takes two to reflect, because it's like you have a mirror. So it's you're bending or folding back when you reflect. So it's a thought, idea, or opinion formed or a remark made as a result of meditation. And really thinking and focusing on something, the child, the behavior, the day, some idea or purpose. So we're going to practice right now, and I want you to get into a comfortable position. If you're sitting, put your feet flat on the floor, your hands in your lap or on your side, and relax your body and settle in. And then I'm going to have you take a big breath in through your nose and let it out with a sigh. So then think for a moment, what brought you into this field? What drew you to working with children or to supervising adults? What was interesting to you? What from your personal history might have been involved? And I'm just going to let you hold that vision for a minute, and I'm going to be quiet for about a minute, and then we'll come back. So take a minute. Let's take in another big, deep breath. and let it out with a sigh. So hopefully, remembering why we got into this is something that can help spark some positive feelings for you. Um, and when you can use reflection to think about an inquiry-based approach, and that means you can look at things and reflect and take action as you are thinking about what have I tried, what am I doing differently. You can do this for relationships, activities, child engagement, everything. So reflective practice is a super important component of early childhood. And one of the biggest challenges, and I think you all know this, is there's not time built in to the day for people to reflect, but it is something that we need to think about. How do we build it in? How do we add that to our day and put it in at the beginning and the end of our day? So being somebody who uses reflective practice, this is really a skill that gets refined. What we find is many people have not had much experience um, trying to really focus on reflection, where you're not jumping to problem solving, but you're really analyzing, thinking, exploring. You have to kind of go inside of yourself, and it is a little bit like meditating. It is concentrating and focusing on one thing. And it does also bring you to some analysis and some cognitive processing. You do start to do some problem solving, but you're making that problem solving out of the thinking part of your brain and not the other part. So if you think of it as a cognitive act, it's meditation, then we're going to give you an opportunity, and this is an activity you could certainly do um, with staff, and that's try this right now. So put same thing, put your feet on the floor, relax your body, take that big breath in and let it out with a sigh. And I want you to think about a recent experience you had at work that you found super fulfilling. It brought you a lot of joy or satisfaction. Think about what was that experience? What was happening? You know, who was involved? What did it feel like? What was the sense you had in the moment? And then we're going to let you probably for about 30 seconds, just let it sit there, and then I'll bring us back. All right, take another big deep breath and let it out with a sigh. So as you're looking at this, being reflective, one of the strategies that I'm going to encourage you to do with staff is to get people into a positive mindset before you try to solve problems. So remembering why you went into this field, you know, you love children, or thinking about, boy, when I did that activity last week, the kids were so excited by the new materials, or when I had that conversation with the parent and they were just sharing how much growth they've seen in their child, you know, it warmed my heart. Whatever that is, it again, it puts you in a more open um, thinking space. It allows you to have a little bit more patience with yourself and exploration of new ideas. So we have to be, you know, going inside yourself is almost this opposite problem, because what we have a tendency to do, we all do, is we see the world through our lens. You know, it's the way we're seeing things. So sometimes just taking a breath and saying, what was really happening? What might the child's experience have been? What other situations? What am I bringing to this from my own experience? Then we can stop ourselves from rushing to judgment or prematurely jumping to a conclusion, particularly again, if we say behavior is communication, and maybe we're misinterpreting what the child's trying to tell us. So, really understanding that it's this observation and mindfulness component that we want to put in place. So we're going to do, now this is, hopefully you've gotten yourself in a good place in your brain. So now we're going to practice again. And this time, take your big breath and let it out with a sigh. And then think about something in your work with a child or with the class, or in your case, with the adults, that's puzzling to you or challenging. What about the situation is puzzling, and why do you think it's so different? It's not responding in normal ways. Why do you think it might be happening? Is there a source of an issue? Is there one simple action you can learn to test the beginning of a possible solution or to get more information about what's really happening? So I'm now going to let you again 30 seconds. It says a minute, it's 30 seconds in this time, and just let it sit there and really take some thought. So take a breath again. Let it out with a sigh. So hopefully you were in a place that you could think differently about that situation. This is a chance for you to just think about, what did you reflect on in the practice slides? Do you have regular reflective practice built in for yourself? And for your staff? And if so, how might you deepen the experience? And if you don't have it, what could you do to build that in? And we will talk about a couple of ideas. But I'm going to give you another minute, this time a real minute, to think about what's happening and write these down. So I'm going to stop sharing and just invite anyone who is comfortable. I don't want to hear what you were reflecting on. That's for you. But if you do engage in regular reflection and reflective practice, what are some ways that you build that in? I would love to hear if somebody has some examples of how they build that in. And if you don't, what are some ideas that you would like to try? So I'm hoping that somebody will unmute and put their camera on and share their thoughts.
Hi, my name is Miriam.
Hi,
I
Miriam.
think for myself, being new in this role, I've been actually in a toddler class for a year. And when you have a big class, um, and there are the children that get overstimulated, or something's happening at home and that reflects when they're in the classroom, I always tell myself, if I become impatient, the way that I speak to the child at this moment behind these closed doors, is it the same way I would speak to that child in that moment if the parents were in the classroom? So that's something that has really helped me self-reflect, breathe in, take a step back, smell the flowers. And I love that you said earlier, and I forgot who quoted it, but the one of, you can't see the movie when you're in the movie. So
Yeah,
I really
Laura
love
Fish.
that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it's really helpful, and I think I my first experiences were in a lab school. So we had observation, we were being observed all the time, and you never knew that somebody was observing you. And that really did have an impact on our behavior because you never knew who was watching. So I think that's kind of a good lens. Like, would I say this if the parent was watching me? Would I say this if my supervisor was watching me? I think those are great things. And realizing we're human beings, we respond, we react. But if we know we can breathe, we can stop some of that reaction so we can respond. Shailene shared, and this is true for so many of us. She has a 30 to 45-minute drive, so she can reflect on her commutes to and from work. I have to say that when I don't have a commute, sometimes I'm like, when I was working from home, I missed the drive because that drive forces you, gives me that time to kind of reflect and think. And I also love the fact that you can do voice memos now. So if you come up with a brilliant idea, you can, say, Siri, take a memo or something. And then I hope none of your phones turned on and tried to take a memo right then. Anyone else have something that they can share about how they build it in, or how you've done it for staff, either way?
Hi, for our staff, once a month we have our mental health specialists go to each of the sites and they do an hour of mental health with the teachers where they do reflection. We actually also bought yoga mats so if the teachers wanted to be lying down while they're doing their reflection, or Um, they even got those lotions with scent, so they can when they're like massaging their hands for pressure points to relax. So there's also that the smell helps too. So we've been doing those kinds of activities for the teachers, I think, and they're the ones who are looking forward to it now that they're asking, when is it? What day is it going to be in terms of when they're going to get it in their site? So we've been trying to do that, monthly, and now we're looking at maybe trying a month, but I think that it also helps the teachers. And then also, of course, daily is giving them things that they can do at the end of the day, because like you said, we are getting more children with behavior concerns and younger kids that they were not used to working with. And so there's a lot more of pressure. They're putting more pressure on themselves in terms of, I feel like I'm not a good teacher
Right.
because these are younger kids, they're not getting what we're doing, but it's more of like letting them know, hey, we need to adjust. We
Yeah.
just need to
Yeah.
adjust. We need to meet the kids where they are. And so I always kind of tell them, no, you're doing a good job. I said, as long as the kids are smiling and happy and don't want to go home, I said, you guys are doing an awesome job. And
And sometimes
sometimes
when they
it's,
do want to go home, it's okay.
yeah, I said, it's as simple as that,
Yeah.
wherein they're just glad that, when they're glad that they're there, even the kids that are crying coming in, they're still crying leaving, but still they wanted to be there kind of
Right.
thing.
Right.
So it's a lot of those little things that we try to do in terms of supporting.
So I think that there's two things I heard that I want to just reinforce. And one is that as an administration, you are building it into the routine for the teachers, which tells them that you value this. So that communicates right away that we know this is an important tool for you. And I
Yeah.
think naming it, talking about reflection as a tool, as a close to magic, it doesn't cost money. It just
Mhm.
takes time, and time is money, I know. But the
Mhm.
other thing that I heard was really being flexible about the different ways that work for people and being really responsive to that. So Samantha also, chimed in similar to Miriam, and I think that picturing, that you're caring for your own child or a parent is really nice. I'm going to give you two other tools that some people have shared with me that might be helpful for you. One is many people will find if they have like a beautiful photo or something that they can look at. So for me, I always have, and I'm looking at it right now, I have a calendar that's from nature. So it's parks, or it's when I go to Hawaii, buy a beautiful, calendar. So I have a beautiful photo that I can just look at and kind of go to that place for a moment. It's a intentional way to just be, you know, get back to myself, so that just having someplace, in the classroom, have a picture that brings them joy that they can look at is helpful. Then I've also had people just talk about that, looking at your daily plan or your lesson plan, and just at the end of the day making a couple of notes. It doesn't have to be long notes, but what worked for today and what might I try differently? And don't forget the what worked, because sometimes we jump to what am I going to do differently? But if we think about what worked, it can help inform what we could do differently. Brenda talks about observing and writing feedback, and helping, looking at the way she can reinforce reflection and really feeding back to people what you're seeing. Because again, they're in the movie. So I think that's really lovely. I'm going to move us along, but keep thinking. I think, there's a lot that we can learn from reflection. So I'm going to move on now to our close to magic tool number two. And this is something that we talk about in the teaching pyramid, which I'm sure several of you have been exposed to or had training on. But I like to share this with the world. It's not exclusive to the teaching pyramid. And that is really trying to figure out, what is it we're looking for from children? How do we pick that out, acknowledge it, be really descriptive? And how can we do that more than just empty praise? So good job, good job, good job. Kids hear that all day long and it stops having meaning. And also it doesn't really tell them what they're doing. It doesn't help them see, oh, this is what they're looking for. So, I might have just kicked my the kid next to me and I was looking up at you. If you say good job for the looking, I don't know if it was for the looking or the kicking, you know? So again, that's kind of a silly example, but you never know. We also talk about adding to your description, like you were really concentrating on your work. You can add expectations that you might have in the classroom, like when you walk so quietly, you're being really respectful, or you're concentrating on your work, you're going to be very independent as you learn. Whatever characteristic or expectation or whatever you want to do can be really helpful. So for those of you for whom this is new, um, positive descriptive acknowledgement is just kind of like a spotlight on appropriate behavior. So when children have challenging behavior, we have no trouble commenting, interfering, doing things. But when children are doing what we expect, we have a tendency to be quiet. So what we want to do is we want to really acknowledge the behavior we want by describing what the child is doing with a short statement. So it's most effective when it's done in that moment. Remember, I said kids are in the moment people. So as they're walking, you say, you're using your walking feet. You're being so safe, as opposed to, remember, use your walking feet, which is a great reminder. It's a positive reminder. But then once kids are walking, we don't say anything. So then you want to close that loop. If you say a positive direction, you want to close the loop. And at the end of the day, it doesn't help to say, oh, and you all remember to use your walking feet. But if you said to them, you're using your walking feet, at the end of the day, if you say, hey, you guys were really using your walking feet when we came in from outside today. Now they're going to remember because you mentioned it in the moment, and that kind of made it connect as a neuronal marker. So the easiest way to think about it, and those of you who work with infants and toddlers do this all the time, is say what you see. It's kind of the sports casting. What you want to do is it has to be positive. You want to say what you see while the child is engaged in the positive behavior. So sometimes the hardest part of this is knowing what we're looking for. I'll give you an example of a child that is throwing blocks. So you don't want him to throw blocks. So you say, don't throw blocks. Well, that's not okay. What do you say when he's not throwing blocks? Thanks for not throwing the blocks. And then he hears throw the blocks. That's right. I like throwing blocks. So what you want to do is you want to say, oh, you're keeping the blocks close to the floor. You're playing with the blocks by building a tower. You want to describe what's the behavior they're doing that you want them to be doing. And that's that description. And you can sometimes say what was happening before, what happened after. So it might be, oh, you really wanted that toy and you asked for a turn and he said no, and you waited. You waited and said, okay, I'll come back. You were so patient. So you kind of can paint the situation so that the child really gets it. And it's this sign of recognition. Some people say, but I want to praise children. I want them to know that I'm approving of them, that I think it's a good thing that they did it. And what I will say is, remember, behavior is communication. If you're shining a spotlight on their positive behavior, if you're smiling, if you're saying, you did that thing, you are really focused, that is going to be heard from them as recognition, but it's heard in a way that gives them the credit. It's builds internal or intrinsic motivation, as opposed to, you did such a good job. Ooh, what else can I do that the teacher thinks is a good job? As opposed to, oh, you are really being so careful when you're carrying that bunch of materials. Oh, I can be careful in other places. So it just shifts the kind of motivation to the child, and it gives the child that credit for the work that they're doing. So here's some examples, and this is just straight saying what you see. You're really concentrating on that puzzle. You kept your hands to yourself. She asked you to stop and you stopped. Like, think about that one. Think about that one. We've got a kid that we're saying, listen to their words. You got to listen to your friends. And then when somebody does, do we say to them, wow, she asked you to stop and you stopped, you came right to circle. You kept all four legs of the chair on the floor. Any of these things, are good examples of positive descriptive acknowledgement. You can boost the magic when you increase the number of times that you provide that in acknowledgement and encouragement. So whenever, you have a problem behavior, whenever you see something that you're finding challenging, what you want to do is, what is it I want the child to be doing instead? and then catch them when they're doing that. So that, like I said, is the hardest piece, because we're very good at looking for trouble. That's our job. We have to keep everybody safe. And if we have a child there's been behaviors that are happening, say, what do I want him to be doing instead? He's crowding everybody when they're lining up to wash their hands. What do I want him to do instead? I want him to wait his turn. I want him to be patient. I want him to do something else with his hands. So now you have a list of things. So you watch him, you say, hey, you're playing, Eensy Weensy Spider while you're waiting for your turn. That's a great thing to do. What else can you do? So you're able to look for what you want. Because I'm telling you, it's harder than it sounds. It's harder than it sounds. The other thing is be as explicit and specific as you can. So you don't want to just say, good job for walking. You want to say, oh, you walked so slowly. And if you say good job, just keep going and make that big description. Um, and it's also helpful to add that, like I said, the expectation or the characteristic. Oh, you walked so slowly. That's so safe. You kept your hands to yourself. That's so respectful. You know, you gave him a turn. That's so friendly. So we have things that we can say, or you were being friendly. We like what we say is do the you. Start with you statements or the child's name. That'll help you, because if you start with I like the way, then again, that's praise or good job. So start with the you statements, or the child's name, and that's helpful. So here's some examples that you can do for the PDA Plus. It can be expectations, it can be the outcomes or the results or the impacts, it can be desired characteristics, it can be ability or effort. So I'm going to give you some specific examples. And again, these are all in the PowerPoint if you download it for later. So here's one with an expectation. You turned the pages of the book so carefully. That's a plain PDA. That's saying what you see. Now you've been working on kids being gentle with library books, right? So now you say you turned the pages of that book so carefully, you're being respectful. So now we've added respectful. And what's interesting about this is sometimes words like respectful don't have a lot of meaning to young children. And the way that we build meaning is commenting on what they're doing and then linking that word to it. So you turn the pages of that book so carefully, you're being respectful. That's a way for you to help them understand what that means. Here's an outcome or result or impact. You gave some of the markers you were using to Raul. That's just saying what you see. But here's the part that gets it kind of a boost. You gave some of the markers you were using to Raul. Now you can both color. So now you're saying, see what happens when you do this? When you give some of your markers, you both get to color. So you're helping children. And this is important. Some children are not that good at seeing the perspective of others. They're very much into what's happening from their perspective, and they're not used to seeing from other people's perspectives. So this builds some empathy and understanding as well. Here's the desired characteristic. And this is something good when you're working with children and you're thinking, what is it? I want them to be productive, or I want them to be independent. Then you can add that. So you buttoned your sweater all by yourself. You are very independent. So that's a way to say this is a characteristic you're looking at. Or patience, as I just talked about. You waited so calmly in that line. You're being very patient. So you're getting a characteristic and adding it. And then finally, you can look at their ability and their effort. Sometimes for children who are struggling with behavior, we want to acknowledge the little steps they take, even though it's not quite as complete as we would want. So you built a marvelous spaceship with the Legos. You were focused and it was very creative. So maybe this is a child that is not usually paying close attention. So you can just say, hey, you really focused and look how creative that is. You're trying to connect again that they were doing something, even it wasn't, a mega spaceship. It was a little spaceship, but it's still there. So we're going to practice the PDAs in your head. So we're going to go back, put your feet on the floor, hands in your lap, relax, take a big breath in and let it out. And think of a behavior that you would like to see more of in a child, a staff member, a family member. What can you say when you see this behavior? And is there anything you can add? And I want you to say it to yourself and see if you can make it sound natural. So again, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that. All right, so take a deep breath in and let it out with a sigh. So I'm hoping that you got a chance to do some practicing with it. I will say that PDA for adults takes a little bit more practice because um, people might misread it and think it's condescending if you're saying, oh, you use walking feet, you're being very respectful. But on the other hand, if you say to somebody, you put so much thought into this um, memo that you wrote to me, it made it really clear when I was reading it. That's PDA. So anyways, just things to think about. So I gave you a handout that came from the national model called Recommendations and Considerations for Positive Descriptive Feedback. And that's what they call it nationally. I think they liked PDF better than PDA, but we like the acknowledgement part. So this gives some information about it. And we also included, I think there's also a handout that says how you can move from praise to acknowledgement there's a two-sided handout in there. So when you're building positive relationships, which is that base of the pyramid, positive descriptive acknowledgments really help that. It makes emotional deposits for children. It helps them build their brains because you're connecting what behaviors you're looking for with what behaviors they're doing. So you're acknowledging that. It's building those relationships because they recognize that you're paying attention, you're looking at them. There's a lot of trust that gets built. Children's skills, you see so much more language in the language models. If you take away all the good jobs, you've got more time to say things that are going to build the language models for them. And when you are scanning for success and looking for those things that you want children to do, you increase those behaviors and the children start looking for it as well. One of the things that I've pointed out and that people sometimes are surprised about is when children tattle, they come up and tell you what other children are doing wrong. Usually they're just telling you what they think is important to you. So if you do a lot of directions and corrections with children, the children are paying attention to that. So they're going to come up to you and tell you, oh, he hit me. He wasn't waiting his turn. He yelled outside and whatever it is, that's what they think is important to you. That's what you're spending your time on. If you start scanning for success and really increasing the positive statements and recognition of the behaviors you want, that's what the children will start noticing. And they'll start telling you, hey, you know what? He waited for his turn. He used his words today. Whatever it is, they're going to start feeding that back to you. And I think it's important to recognize that part of what happens with children's behavior is they're developing their self-control. Young children are very impulsive, and that's one thing to remember as you have the younger children. They are going to be impulsive. Things are going to happen more quickly. And I want us to remember that the way that we deepen their impulse control is co-regulation. It's like us, as somebody pointed out, taking that breath as they approach the child. So what you're projecting as you come to the child is not stress because, I got to come over here, but it's, I'm going to take a breath and go, so something's going on here. What do I see? So you're going to be relaxed and that's going to co-regulate. Children pick up on those kinds of things. It's the same thing as they're getting to recognize what is happening for themselves, they start recognizing it in other people. So the child that you're really trying to get to be more patient is going to notice when other people are not patient. He's not waiting, he's not waiting. And you're thinking, well, you never wait. So why are you bringing it up? But the truth of the matter is, he's starting to see it in other people. So actually, that's usually a good sign that they're moving from co-regulation to kind of other regulation. Maybe I can regulate other people, and that's a path to self-regulation. So that means you're getting there. And that's where you can really help. Yeah, what do you do when you want to be more patient? You can always bring it back and help them focus on themselves. So we're going to give you a minute to make some notes. Again, if you have the bright ideas, here it's number 3. If you don't have the bright ideas, just write it on a piece of paper. What strategies might you use to shift to using more positive descriptive acknowledgement in your work with children or in supporting your staff's work with children or in your work with the staff and adults? And then are there any questions you have about PDA and PDA Plus? So again, I will give you a minute to do that, and then we'll do some sharing. Okay, that was a minute. Let me unpin myself and stop sharing, and we'll see if any of you have any questions about PDA or PDA Plus. Some of you, as I know, have been through this training. Have you been using it, seeing your teachers use it? Anything you want to share about this particular technique, this second close to magic?
We can share.
Sure. Thanks, Sandra.
So, for our classrooms, I've been noticing that, because we've been working on those PDAs in the classrooms and setting those, and we could see that children are responding back to them because right now we're doing parent-teacher conferences and parents are been saying, um, he says, "Oh, look, I'm doing this because I'm being responsible." Or to the families, out of the environment. So even if sometimes we don't see that progress or growth in the child, by them hearing it every day, they're gonna be sharing it with their families, with their outsiders, and on their own times. So yes, there's more to work on it. Yes, we have to improve, like there's always that space to grow. But I could see the difference in the children. And like you said, they always kind of remind themselves or each other, you're being friendly or, oh, look, I'm your friend. And we are kind to each other and on their own little conversations. So it's effective to be that and you build that more positive relationships instead of that fear in fear in the sense of like you're demanding me to do cleanup you're because you like it because you want me to do that so makes it different it shifts
Right.
the concept.
Oh, we're cleaning up to keep the room safe, and so we can find our toys next time, it's very different. And again, that it also goes back to those mistaken goals. If it's a power struggle, it's not about I'm going to make you pick up the toys. It's like, oh, it's just what we have to do right now. We all clean up, so let's do that. So I love that you're using it. One of the things we do when we do the training on the pyramid is we talk about the ratio of positive or neutral conversations to corrections and directions. And that what most teachers, when observers go in, are using 3 corrections and directions to every 1 positive or neutral statement. But in order to effect change, you've got to have 5 positive or neutral statements to every 1 direction and correction. So that means, usually there's 3 directions and corrections and 1 positive or descriptive acknowledgement or neutral statement like, oh, I had cereal for breakfast. And for these 3, there needs to be 15 positive or neutral statements. So that is when people go, oh, and they might feel like they're doing too much. But I always invite people to do an audio recording of themselves. Just, turn the audio recording on in your pocket and then listen to it and say, how much of the time am I using positive or neutral statements? And how much of the time am I correcting and directing? And how can I change that balance? So that's helpful. Brianna, were you going to share something?
Yeah, actually, this is something that I have repeated to my staff, my teachers quite frequently, because it is important. And like Sandra said, it does work, and I've seen it work when I was an educator. I would do it and it worked. And I think, honestly, I'm already going to share the resources with all of my staff because it's important for them to know that I'm not just saying it because I think it's great, but it is coming from a place of research and there's evidence that it does have an influence on the classroom in a positive way. Because a lot of the time you hear the good jobs, great jobs, oh, love the picture, but that's it. We need more, right? Because it does influence the children. And so I do appreciate all the resources because this is something I can actually give to my staff right away and share, and it's written out for them. It's spelled out, and it's from there. It's kind of on them to kind of follow through on it, but it's something I want to encourage.
And remember, this is being recorded and will be available. So it's something you could watch together with your staff. Of course, I don't know if they'll keep the comments in or not, but just something.
That's a good point, though.
Anyone else or anybody who have questions? Is there anybody that had never heard of positive descriptive acknowledgement before? Okay, well, thank you very much for that sharing. Let me go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so we're going to keep going here. And now we're going to think about how do we set children up for success from the start? And this is something I think as administrators, those of you who are in that position or lead teachers even, really can be focused on what is it that we can do that's going to support children to be successful. And that's where those bottom tiers of the pyramid really come in. So we got to take time to teach. And this is something that's super helpful with the younger children. Some children may be experiencing care away from their families for the first time. So this may really be a new experience for them. And, you know, maybe your 25th year teaching, but it's a brand new experience for them. And keeping that in mind, you know, sometimes children have been in group care in other settings, and maybe they had different kinds of rules and expectations. You know, maybe they had no rules and expectations. So it's just being aware of that. And then taking anytime you start the school year or start a new student, it can go either way, you have to really be thoughtful about being explicit about teaching children what is it you want them to do in your setting. And that's one of the things that we're going to think about right now, because a lot of times, well, we'll get to that. I'm going to jump ahead of myself. It's all about relationships. That's something we say at the program for infant toddler care. It's something we say at the teaching pyramid, because it is. Relationships are the foundation for everything we do. It's how children thrive and grow is through relationship. It's also what works best with families. If you can get to know the families over time, then if there is an issue you need to talk to them about, you're going to do it on the basis of a relationship. The first conversation you have with them won't be, you know, I need to talk to you about your child's behavior, because then that right away puts the parent on the defensive. They don't really think that you know them or their child. But if you've been talking to them all the way along, you're going to have a little bit of a sense of, oh, this parent seems to be seeing the child differently than I am, or whatever it is. It's true with the children too. Sometimes we take for granted that children are going to enjoy school and enjoy the adults, but we aren't focused on, and as I said, the children whose behavior is challenging or who have some different responses to the environment and to others, they sometimes push people away with their behavior. And so we don't do those emotional deposits. We don't build those relationships as early as we should, because it just doesn't work. I'll tell you, and some of you have heard me tell this story. I had a friend who was a substitute teacher. She liked the flexibility. She had her children were in school, but you know, she didn't want to work full time. So she substituted in a lot of preschool programs around the community and was really good at it. And you know, a good substitute's worth their weight in gold. So she was at a place that she hadn't been to before. And there was a child, they were outside, and a child was throwing sand. So she walked over, got down at his level, and said in her best, you know, supportive voice, "Oh, it looks like you want to do some throwing. Sand stays in the sandbox. If you want to throw, let's go find something you can throw." And he stood up and he put his hands on his hips and he said, "I don't have to listen to you. I was here before you came. I'll be here when you left. I don't have to listen to you." And essentially what he was saying is, I don't have a relationship with you. Why should I listen to you? And that's what it's about. Children are driven by their impulses, and they don't see any reason to not do that unless there's a good relationship that's helping them think about that. The other thing is children learn and develop in the context of relationships. They do best when they feel seen and heard. And as I said, the children whose behaviors are the most challenging, their behaviors often prevent them from benefiting from relationships within their own family, in their classroom, with you, the teacher, or the teachers in the classroom. And I think I often say, who's the first child dropped off and the last one picked up? Typically the child with challenging behavior. They never miss a day of school because their parents need the break. So, you know, this is why we have to think about who, you know, how can I connect with this child? How can I really get to know this child when they're not getting in trouble. And that's the key. So one of the ways that you can do this is to focus your PDA on children who challenge you. And I think this is an important thing. I'm not saying only to children who are challenging. You want to use PDA for everybody, but there's a technique called the paperclip method that can really be helpful. So if there's a child that you find challenging, you want to focus on how can I give more specific PDA throughout the day. So you put 5 paper clips in your pocket, and then anytime you catch that child doing something you want them to be doing, and you give them a PDA, you move a paper clip to the other pocket so that hopefully in the end of the day, all 5 paper clips have moved from your right pocket to your left pocket. And if you've done it, for the whole day, then you can start saying, okay, I'm going to try 5 PDAs in the morning and then 5 more in the afternoon. And again, I'm not saying this is only for that child because you're going to be giving PDAs throughout the classroom, but it's a way for you to be more intentional. And I'll tell you where, not this is not where this came from, but where this has been very effective. I was coaching in a classroom and they were very good at giving positive descriptive acknowledgments. They had a beautiful team. They were working together. Everything was going quite smoothly. They had one child who was particularly exuberant. He would come in and he was super excited to be at school. And he was so excited and he, did a lot of flailing with his arms and his legs. He was also kind of big for his age. And he would go up and hug kids and that when they didn't really want it. And he would, his hands and feet were always in people's space. He would grab at people's materials. So it was not coming out of any maliciousness. They said it was really clear. He was just super excited and exuberant. So what I noticed is they were fabulous at giving PDAs, but I was writing down what they were saying and who they were saying them to. And what I noticed is this particular individual child got 0 PDAs in the hour I was observing, but he got probably 20 directions and corrections. And what was happening is when he was not interfering with somebody else, when he was kind of doing what they wanted him to do, first of all, sometimes they just didn't notice, because it's when he does something that was problematic, that stood out, that kind of got their attention. And some of it he just faded in. And I think the other part is they felt like they were saying his name all the time. So they didn't want to call him out more. Does that make sense? They felt like I'm already focusing a lot of attention on him. But what they didn't realize is all the attention was negative or corrective. So in this case, I would just go stand behind him when he was on task or he was doing something appropriate, which would be their little reminder to say, oh my goodness, you're keeping your hands to yourself. You're really working with your materials right in front of you. Things that they were looking, and we had to make a list. What are they looking for from him? You used gentle hands when you greeted your friend, whatever it was. And it was interesting because they were just amazed at how quickly things shifted for him. Because again, he was eager, he was excited. He really had not been thinking about how this might change. So I really want to, encourage people to use, you can use paper clips, you can use poker chips, you can do whatever. But this is something that can be really, really powerful because sometimes we feel as though we're giving a lot of attention to the child, but our attention is not necessarily around things that are appropriate or desired. So little technique that I really encourage. The other piece that I mentioned it before, I'm going to mention it again. As people are welcoming younger children, it's really important that we all revisit the developmentally appropriate behavior for the different ages. So there are many things that I will hear teachers describe as challenging behavior that are actually age appropriate. So for 2 or 3-year-olds to sit for very short periods of time, and I'll hear somebody say he just doesn't sit while I'm, going through the book or whatever. 2 and 3-year-olds are typically quite active. If you ever watch a child, just watch group of children unsupervised, family gatherings, Walmart, wherever it might happen, you will notice that the 2 and 3-year-olds often don't stop moving. They are often moving constantly. Even if they're sitting, they're putting their leg up, they're looking at something, they're, reaching around. So they're very, very active. So sometimes we have expectations that they're going to sit and listen, and they can listen when they're not sitting. They can listen when they're active. That's something that they're able to do. The other thing that's really important to understand is when children are experiencing strong emotions like frustration and anger, it comes out in physical conflict. So the behavior that we see, the problem that we see is they're hitting children. The real issue is they don't have any way to express their frustration and anger. That's the way that they have figured out to do it. So we can say, it looks like you're really frustrated with this. It looks like you couldn't get this to work for you, or it looks like you wanted to play with this. I wonder if we could take a breath, or let's step away. So guiding with empathy and trying to acknowledge that behind that behavior might be again, an emotional reaction, response. So just as we, can have strong reactions and flip our lids, that's something that can happen for young children, and it happens very frequently for them. So I don't know. I just think it's really powerful. And often when there's physical conflict, you will see teachers trying to um, solve the conflict by having the child who was hurt, having the child who did the hitting say, look what you did to your friend. Look, he's hurt. You look what you did to him. And that friend is still saying, I'm just so mad. I have no idea what I'm doing. And so they can't, nobody asks them how they're feeling. He took my toy. I was angry, and he's not even going to be able to say that, but you can at least start thinking about, well, what are you feeling right now? What's going on for you? And get that child to be in a different part of their brain. Because once we start labeling emotions and children start understanding those emotions live in the upstairs part of their brain. So that helps reconnect their upstairs and downstairs part of their brain. So I just want to remind you, there are so many great resources about development available, including videos, that have videos that are super helpful for people to see. So I believe I uploaded a list of all the links that I've been sharing, and all the links are in that handout if you download it. But as you know, the preschool transitional kindergarten learning foundations were recently updated. They are working on a revision of the videos for those as well. The infant toddler foundations have also just recently been released. The original volumes are still available, and the original videos that were made for the original preschool foundations and the infant toddler foundations are still available on CA Early Learning Videos. So if you are, as anybody in California, you have to just sign up with your email address and a password, and then you will have access to all those videos. And you can, again, share those with staff. You can watch together, especially if you have staff, again, that have been used to dealing with 4-year-olds. Go back and watch the infant toddler foundations that talk about, 8, 18, and 36-month-olds, because chances are they've got a lot of kids in that 18 to 36-month-old emotional place, and really looking at what that is. There's also a resource called the ECE Hub that was out of the University of Virginia, and it's just got fabulous little snippets and resources of videos. And for so many people, videos are a powerful learning tool. So this gives a chance, if you want, for people to, look at those. They have them divided by age category. They have them divided by different elements of development. So these are just resources that are available to you. And I really encourage you to look at them and to make sure your staff knows about them too. And particularly, again, to revisit what is typical development, and knowing that sometimes things that we feel are behavior problems are really just a group of 3-year-olds, and that's one of those things. This is the other piece that can be really helpful, and it goes back to, children being new to group settings or being in a different group setting than they've been in before. And we have rules and expectations. We have an agenda. We expect certain things are going to happen, but the children don't necessarily know what we're thinking. They can't read our mind. And if in the teaching pyramid, we talk about using some broad statements that are sort of the umbrellas, the why behind your rules, and then have your rules for different areas of the classroom, because many of us have rules, or I know Frog Street calls them commitments, that are much more about large group time, hands in lap, eyes on the teacher, listening ears, any of those things. That's really about large group time. So when you're in the block area, you don't want your hands in your lap. You want to be engaged with the toys. But if we say, well, how are you safe in the block area? How are you kind? How are you respectful? That's very helpful to think about. And if you're in family childcare, for example, you've got all different ages. You can say, oh, when you've got the after school child who comes in the afternoon and wants to use some really small art activities, and you can say, you know what, let's wait until the babies go down for their nap, because it would be dangerous if they got this in their mouth. So you can say, we're going to be safe, and we can do, we're keeping the babies safe. What's safe for the babies is different for you because you're older, and that kind of thing. So let me just show you an example of what it can look like in a family childcare home. So being friendly and caring or kind, we say goodbye to our parents. I know that this is something that um, many parents say, let me just sneak out because it'll be easier. And it'll be easier on the parent. It's never easier on the child, because nobody wants to feel like they were just abandoned. So we always want to, set up a saying goodbye and having a goodbye ritual or something. So putting that right in your expectations. Oh, we say goodbye to our parents. We help set the table. So talking about that, um, caring and kindness. Respectful, we keep our voices low when other children are sleeping. We use walking feet indoors. I always say this walking feet thing is such a school um, expectation and rule, because at home, if you've got, multiple children, you might say to your older child, you run, get me a diaper right now, hurry. You don't want them to use walking feet, run up the stairs. So, walking feet is a very specific thing. And same as, jumping off of furniture. At home, that might be just fine. So talking about at school, we jump on the trampoline, or we jump over here and we use the table for writing on, or whatever it is. Safe and healthy, washing hands before we eat. As we all know, that's super important. And the first time kids are in group care, they will get everything and share everything germ-wise. Putting our toys away, which we mentioned. So this is just something that we encourage people to do, and think about how you might do this in a variety of different places. And one of the easiest ways to do this support of what you want people to start doing is to use visual strategies. So visual strategies is when you have something like a picture or a symbol that conveys the idea that you have verbally. And the reason we're doing that is it helps for children who are just learning language. It helps for children who speak a different language at home. It also, when we say something, it disappears. And I'm sure this has happened to you as an adult, but we are not always listening when somebody makes an announcement. As a trainer, I'm often going, wait, what did you say we were going to do? And I swear I thought I was really clear. Same thing happened to children. You may give what you think is a really clear, positive, descriptive direction, and they weren't listening. So when you have the visual, it helps them. You can say, oh, this is the time that we're doing whatever. And you can use this for individual children. If you've ever included children who have significant disabilities, oftentimes they will have their own visual schedule because they need a much more individualized, predictable understanding of what happens first and then next, and when they're finished with something, what they do after that. So that's an individual strategy. But what we found is that all children love having a real visual schedule, or have something that really makes sense to them. So if you're going to try to do some schedules and routines, what you want to do is you want to take advantage of photos that are representing the group. It's like, what can you do? So in this case, you can see this has the big times of the day: greetings, free choice, carpet time. And then those are actually pictures of the children. So you can take pictures of the children, and that gets them to be much more interested. That kind of gets them connected to it. And then you can keep that and then replace it. Like, let's say free choice, you've got nobody using the science area. So maybe you take a picture of some kids in the science area and put that up for your free choice picture. And that might remind children, oh, yeah, I can go to that area. So that's one way to do it. Or let's say at carpet time, you have a couple of children who really are struggling to sit and pay attention. Have them pose for you, have them sit down and pretend that they're listening, take a picture of them, and then they're used as the example in the carpet time. Hey, let's sit down like, Brooke and Maria were doing. Let's see how they're sitting right here. We can all sit like that. So it also helps paint a different picture of children who may sometimes be seen as troublemakers or problem children. It gives them a different vision. It gives the other children a different way of looking at them. And it also provides that visual reminder. This is what we're doing in this setting. So if you can keep changing the pictures throughout the year, that really helps. Some people have taken the pictures and then they make little books so that they can send home and kids can say, this is what we do in school, and they can talk about it and they can go through the pictures. And if you're changing the pictures, by the end of the year, you'll have pictures with, every kid will be in a different picture. So you'll be able to make that. I'm going to show you a video of a way that you can use it also just for a specific routine. So it's not just that you use it for the big schedule, but for routines. And this is something, again, you might be having difficulty with the transition. In this case, I think it was transition from nap time to washing the hands and going to their bathroom. So they put together a routine. So we'll let you see it.
Hi, Taya. You have your shoes on?
Yeah.
And then what do you do?
My boots.
Your boots. And what do you do after that? Nice work. You know the routine. And then, can you show me over here? What do you do?
Go potty.
And then what do you do after potty?
Wash our hair.
And then what do you do?
Play.
Yes.
So you can see this is a place that has lots of pictures up, and the pictures are of those children. So using pictures in a very meaningful way. This child obviously knew the routine, so she was just doing it, but they were having her show you why she knew the routine. And when you have a new child that starts in the middle of the year, sometimes these routine pictures the other kids don't need, but they will be helpful for children who are new to that. So with visual strategies, it helps you really communicate your expectations. It really supports the receptive language, what children are understanding, and expressive. Children can use those. They can point. You can say, oh, you want to go outside. Let's look at the schedule first. We got to wash our hands and eat snack, and then we'll go outside. So it gives you some ideas. It also helps enhance memory. One of the things that children are doing is they're being able to listen to more things in a row and remember them. When I was first working with very young children, one of my mentors said, think of the age of the child, and up until about 4, it goes by year. So a 1-year-old can remember one thing at a time. A 2-year-old usually can remember 2 things at a time. Pick up your socks and get your shoes. That's 2 things. A 3-year-old might be able to remember 3, and a 4-year-old 4. And then after that, I think we top out. Some of us, even as adults, top out at that. So when you have this thing that you're trying to get kids to remember, breaking it down, using it in a visual way helps children. It also helps you teach the routines. So if you have a routine like washing hands and you've got some children who are just running their hands underwater and not using soap or not drying their hands, you can break it down so that they can see that. And again, this is a strategy that can be used with some children who have disabilities that may need to have those pieces broken down, but other children will also appreciate that and will do that. You can also use visuals to cue the positive behavior. If they had a child that went straight from putting their blanket at the side and ran out to play, they might take them back to what are we supposed to do after this? And again, that takes away the power struggle. You're not saying, hey, you forgot to go to the bathroom and wash your hands. It's like, what do we do? Let's go look at the routine. And it moves away from that power dynamic. So children who are sort of like to be in charge of themselves can look at the picture, and that's like an outside. It's not between you and the adult. It's between you and schedule. It's just what we have to do. I had one teacher that said, "It's my job as a teacher. I have to change your diaper. It's my job." So, it was really interesting to think about that. So take your bright ideas once again, and I just want to think about which of these strategies, and this time I am going to give you a minute and a half. Which of these strategies really resonated with you? Which do you think you might want to have a conversation with your staff about? What do you maybe have questions or need more support for any of the strategies? And so I'm going to let you do that. And as we've done before, we will come back and share a few things, or you can ask some questions. But I'm going to give you a minute and 30 seconds because this was a lot of information.
I'll go. I really like the paperclip idea. I think that's going to be like a really nice strategy for some of our team members, just because it kind of reinforces that, giving that positive reinforcement to the kids. I also really like the because sometimes we do have uh, new staff members that come in and they don't know that you have to build a relationship with the kids before you can start actually doing all of the redirecting for them. So like that component is something that we emphasize when we do like orientations with new staff members. It's like you got to have that relationship first before you can get to the education part, because like the example that you gave about that child, it's like, I don't know you, so I'm not going to listen to you. Like, who are you? So yeah, definitely like the paperclip idea it's a really good strategy.
And I think that the tracking the PDA can, as somebody has just put in, Shailene just said, you can track it with all the children. So doing it for a child that needs more is a great strategy. But if you're new to PDA, or if you feel like that's not being used as much, just say, every time I say something that is a PDA, I'm going to move this paperclip. And then kind of do that, I'm going to really try to do 5 by the end of the morning. So thank you for sharing, Lizeth. And I think that's also such a good reminder that we can't assume that children have a relationship with us. For some children, it's going to take longer, and any teacher who's had student teachers or something, or a substitute, they'll watch the children don't respond the same way to those people. And it's usually because they don't have the relationship. Sometimes they're afraid of them, so they'll do whatever because there's a new person and they don't know. And other times it's that happened to me. Anybody else have something that resonated with them, or that they think is, or that they have questions with?
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Hi, Stephanie.
I really like the visual routines, especially for our toddler classrooms. They're right now, that's kind of like what we talk about. Like there's like the power struggle. We have a couple of them, and so I think this will be very helpful. Especially like I think the age group is like 18 months to 20, like to 27. And so I really feel like that our classroom will benefit from that, and just posting it at the entrance, like you said, washing their hands when it's diaper, the circle time area, just posting it everywhere. So that's something that I wrote down and I will implement in the class, and hopefully that helps, because that will be a great redirection when it's like, instead of going back and forth with the child, it's like, okay, hey, let's go.
Let's look at the
Yeah.
schedule. What do we have to do?
Yeah.
I think that's so powerful because, again, especially for this age range, this is all new for them. So you don't want to have, and your whole schedule would take up the whole wall. But you might be able to do just like they did there. They just had that one routine in one area. You might have one thing. Or if you have the full day schedule, you might just put the first part of the day up, and then after there's a, snack, you might change it to the next routine. So whatever is going to support you. But I really applaud you for thinking about it with this age group, because again, why do they have to do something?
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean? I
Yeah.
just go about my day.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think like at home, I mean, I don't know how at home, but I can see that, for example, like one of our children is just 0 to 100.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
running back and forth. There's no like, so then, and then the child has been in our class for maybe 3 months now.
Uh-huh.
And so it's getting to the point where it's disrupting the kids that are already were got used to our routine. So then they're like, hey, he's running around. So like, let's go follow him. And so it's been very difficult.
Yeah.
And so I think implementing like, at home, I don't know how it is, but then here when they walk in, it's like, okay, here in this setting, this is our routine. So,
Absolutely. And I think what you'll find is sometimes parents will say, how do you guys get him to do this? I never can do it
Mhm.
at home. And it might be, gosh, have you ever thought of a visual routine for him in the morning, getting out the door? Parents too. And there's great handouts. I'm going to show you the website in just a minute and show you where some of the handouts are that can be shared with parents.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thank you.
Stephanie, for sharing.
Hi,
Rosetta, oh, yes.
sorry, I just wanted to add also with the visual schedules, because one of the things that we have done too is we actually made this a visual schedule like a pocket schedule. So it has photos and rings, so it's easier to show the children. And for those children who have special needs, one of the things too was that the teachers took a photo of them actually doing the action and then created a specific pocket schedule for them. So it was easier to remind them of what they needed to do. So if it was meal times, then it was a photo of them holding, sitting at the table with, with the plates and everything. If it was nap time, it was a photo of them, napping. So little things like that, I think also help because some of the kids are not verbal, but to see them themselves in a photo of what they're doing actually help the teachers also with their schedules. So
Yeah.
that was just another idea with regards to this because it sort of helps, especially for, like I said, children with special needs. That worked out very well for them too because they saw themselves.
Right. And it can be used as both a cue and a routine builder. So
Yes.
if you have it with them, then you can point out, hey, here's what we do next, and here's you doing it. Then what we want to remind that the children, remind the adults is now follow that up with a PDA when they do it. So we are good at reminding kids and saying, oh, remember, I want you now, it's time for you to go over here and wash your hands. When they do it, say, you did it. You washed your hands. You listened.
Yeah.
You followed the schedule. So we want to be closing the loop. If you give a direction, always reinforce and follow up by describing how they did that. Thank you, Iqbal. That was a very kind thing to say, that it was authentic and helpful. I try really hard. Anybody else? Oh, Sylvia said Montessori. Oh, that's so beautiful. Connection before correction. It's so true. It's all about relationships. And that's the thing. These pieces just take what we know from research and amplify it and give us a little bit of context for the strategies. Kelly, are you coming on visual because you want to share? No. Yes? No, that was just a mistake. Okay, well, I'm going to share the website because I think that can be helpful for you. So this is our website. So I just want to point out, if you get to cainclusion.org, this is the website. Beginning Together, we do have some events coming up. So I'm going to just encourage you, if you go to Beginning Together, when you click on it, somehow it's not clicking right now. There's a thing that says training events, and you can see that we have an inclusion webinar series that's happening through March, and you can join at any time. We also have an Inclusion Facilitators Institute in the spring. So I'm going to really encourage you, to kind of do that. And now I'm going to go back to the home page here and click on the teaching pyramid. And I just want to point out two things. There's under materials, there's family materials. So if you wanted to look at information for families, this has a lot of great articles that were written for families and short handouts that are written for families that are often in multiple languages, not all, but many are in multiple languages. And you can look at these things and these things that you can share with parents. It includes, routines, successful morning, and it really talks about some things that can help children understand. The other material I want to point out under materials is Walking Up the Pyramid. So if you go to Walking Up the Pyramid, we have a lot of specific strategies that you might already be thinking about as directors, but it also gives you additional ideas. Like, here's some things, but we want to talk about taking care of ourselves. So taking care of ourselves, this is a booklet that was put out by the Center for Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation in Georgetown. And this is an activity you can do with your staff, and it helps introduce stress, how people take care of yourselves, and that sort of thing. So these are all resources that you can go to if you're feeling that this would be helpful. And again, this all came from this Walking Up the Pyramid, and it breaks down every single section and has some different things. So I just want to point those two things out for you. I'm also going to wrap this up by sharing a couple of more things from our the PowerPoint. In WestEd, we can provide individual consultation, especially if you're looking at a child with disabilities. The consultation would be virtual. It would be a conversation. We might be able to connect you to other resources in your community, but you can email beginningtogether@wested.org. And again, I believe I put that in the list of links and resources. But just you need to tell us your name, your role in your county, and what question or issue you want to discuss, and we can I have people regionally that I can connect you to, and we can do these short consultations at no charge. If it's a longer consultation, then we can talk about what might be needed. And then if you're new to the pyramid or haven't heard about the pyramid, you can email teachingpyramid@wested.org. And if you have questions, for example, about how do I get training for my staff, there might be things happening locally for you. So those are some things that we can share with you. I also want to say that they are taking your thoughts about this session. So I'm going to paste for you in the chat, and it is also on the Google Doc, the survey for the evaluation SurveyMonkey. So if you click on that link, or if you look on your Google Doc, if you'd rather do it from there, please complete the evaluation. It's very helpful as they're planning for the events for next year. And they do share those with me, so that would be appreciated as well.